This is Mathew Knowles, and I'm listening, and so are you, to Soul Booking Cool with Jewel B.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. I'm Jewel B. Today we are joined by music mogul and executive, college professor, entrepreneur, and best-selling author Mathew Knowles is back to So Booking Cool. The first time we had the pleasure of speaking with him about racism from the eyes of a child, as well as his debut book, The DNA of Achievers. And today we are going to discuss The Emancipation of Slaves Through Music, which is Mr. Knowles' upcoming release. Is that right, Mr. Knowles?
That is. First of all, thank you for inviting me back. And I just love the name Soul Booking Cool. I just think that's a cool name.
Thank you.
But I'm glad to be here and happy to have the interview and have some fun with it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, Mr. Knowles, why is the emancipation of slaves through music important to you?
Well, let me give a little context about how it even derived. I really had no plans about writing this book. 2 semesters ago at Texas Southern University, I got a call from the dean literally the day before class, and I was teaching already 2 courses, and he asked me to teach a 3rd course. And I was like, okay, I'm a team player. And so I was thinking, and there was one of those special study courses where you could really, special topics, where you could really let the course be whatever you want it to be. There were no syllabus for it. So on my drive to class the next day, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? And it's in my mind came the emancipation of slaves through music. And then I thought, it would be interesting for the first time to have a class, totally a research class. And so when I got there, I was expecting, normally I have 40, 50 students. Well, no one knew I was teaching a course, so it was only 10. So I challenged my students to research and to write papers. So those 10 students are co-authors of this book and represent about 25% of the content of the book. So I just want to start out by giving those students credit. They are now students in college and are authors, and that makes me very proud.
I do remember us discussing how your students were involved, and that's incredible. What do you find a lot of them told you that they have learned about Black history after co-writing The Emancipation of Slaves Through Music?
Well, it's not what they learned, it's what we learned, because I even learned a tremendous amount. But the key to this book, it tells the story. A lot of things that I didn't know before this research, and most of the listeners don't know. For example, when the slave ships would take the slaves, that was a 2-year journey. You would go from Africa to the Caribbean, then up to the U.S. That was 2 years. And what we don't understand is just because they were all from Africa don't mean they spoke the same language. Most of them were from different tribes, so they had different dialects and different languages. So they had to learn how to communicate on this ship, on this 2-year journey, and they would do it by clanging their chains or their knocking on the wall of the ship, humming, and so they had to learn how to communicate during this journey. So once they got to the U.S., that's, as we all know, they knew how to communicate. So that's one of the things that I learned. I didn't know the banjo, the harp. I knew drums were all created in Africa. And so we tell that story. And we talk about how religion affected, and music and religion and Christianity during slavery. We talk about how music was used to get the slaves just through a day. I mean, can you imagine what a day of a slave was like? Getting up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and working until 10, 11 o'clock at night. And it was through music. Just as today, we use music to really, when we're having a bad day, music can help. When we're having a good day, music can help. Well, the slaves always had a bad day. There was no good day.
Was there a popular form of instrument from that time period, would you say, or is it about even?
No, the most popular instrument were the drums. And I learned, again, this was a very educational process for me. I didn't know that in the different tribes, based on your position in the tribe, was the size of your drum. And so the drum was very, very popular. As a matter of fact, there were some states, like South Carolina, that wouldn't even allow the slaves to even beat a drum.
Why?
Because it was so popular, and they felt it was a way to communicate, not understanding that the slaves used those songs that they were singing to communicate how to escape. A lot of those songs they were singing on the field. See, the slave master felt that for some reason, if the slaves were singing, they were happy. So they were encouraged to sing all day long, not knowing that they were communicating on how to escape through some of those songs, telling them what time they should attempt to escape, telling them what pathway, go down to the river, you'll see this tree, follow. They had no idea.
When would you say black music started to become commercial?
After slavery and Reconstruction period. You've seen Cadillac Records, I'm sure, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was that era that music really became commercial. And it started out for black folks. We didn't get the same privileges of white artists and songwriters and producers. It was very limited at first. The radio airplay was very limited. When we did concerts, it was very limited. So it was only until starting in the 50s and 60s that it began to get extremely commercial.
And which genre was it? Was it rock, jazz, R&B?
Well, initially when we was the blues, that's where it all started for us. And then out of that was gospel. Gospel was mixed with the blues, and then the blues became R&B, and then R&B became pop, and then hip hop started. That's kind of the process that we went through.
For younger people who may not know, how has black music liberated our people?
Well, again, music is derived from the word muse, which is a spiritual sense almost inside of all of us. And music has always been a comfort for black folks and a liberation. I mean, it was music. When you look at the 70s and 60s, rather, when we had all the demonstrations, We Shall Overcome was probably the most popular song. We used music through all those racial tensions and demonstrations. We use music today in various ways to in our commercials. It's just a way of life that sometimes we don't even think how much music we hear in a day.
Yeah, like what comes to mind, or even commercial jingles like that. That's musical as well.
Exactly. And now that that's grown, now that we have the ability to cross over, and as it used to be, music was extremely segregated, but today it's not, because the world is not as segregated as it was in those years. So there's an opportunity that everyone explores music and all types of music. I mean, for example, here at Music World, I have a country label, Compadre. I have a gospel label, Music World Gospel, and I have a pop and R&B label, Music World Entertainment.
That's amazing. And Music World has been around for 25 years, right?
We're proud. This is our 25th year. I've been able to work with some incredible artists. I'm looking on my wall, Earth, Wind & Fire, signed to the label, OJ's, De La Soul, Sunshine Anderson, of course, Destiny Child and Solange, and and all Beyonce, Kelly, and Michelle, Life Jennings, Nas, and I can go on and on. I can get to country, Billy Joe Shaver, who's a legend, Trent Willman. So I'm just very proud of what the staff here at Music World over those years, but more importantly, my artists and songwriters and producers.
Yeah, and speaking of artists, you also have an artist named Damola, because I want to know who are some upcoming and newer artists that you are excited for, the world to know about.
Well, Damola is a recent signing. I literally was just having a meeting about Damola. We just finished his video. He's from Nigeria, lives here in the States. Afro beats, Afro pop is the new thing in music. Africa experiences and sounds. I think you will see in the upcoming future, a lot of the current U.S. artists will start doing collaborations. That sound we'll start hearing more, and we'll have his video that we'll show to the world probably next week or week after. Really excited about Damola. And then we have Bunny Ray, who's a female rapper who's in the studio now. We have a rock band coming out with later this year. So we're excited. We're excited about the new music that we have. We have gone through years of content boxes over the 25 years, and we found all sorts of music that we recorded, but we never put out. So we're putting that content out. We're looking to go to TV with some of the content that we have, video content over the 25 years. We're looking to do Destiny's Child play, From My Eyes, the Untold Story. There's a book coming out on Destiny's Child that I'm chapter 4 writing as we speak. So it's going to be a great next 12 months. I'm looking forward to it.
Wow. Okay. There's so much I want to ask you about, the things that you just said. First of all, Mr. Knowles, what do you look for in artists, and how do you know they are right for the Music World brand?
Well, for us and for me, the number one thing I look for, I'll have a artist come in to Houston and sit down with me, and often they set up their band, all them, set up ready to play for me or sing, and I say, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that. I want you to sit on the sofa where many legends have sat on, and I want you to just talk to me. I want to get to know you as a person first. And number one, I want to understand how passionate that you are. Because if you don't have the passion, it doesn't matter about your talent. Because with passion, it coexists, it's work ethics. They coexist with each other. And I know from experience, and I talk about this in my first book, The DNA of Achievers, that when you live your passion, you never work a day in your life. So I want artists that are passionate about what they do. That's number one for me. Then I want to see your talent or hear your talent. And then imaging becomes critical. We're in a very image-driven business, especially for women. So that becomes important. So it's passion, then your talent, and then imaging.
Why do you think imaging is so important for women artists?
Well, it's not as important in gospel. But when you get to pop and R&B, and you look at those artists that are extremely successful, imaging becomes a very critical part of it. Because the first thing we do is we see. Our brain takes us to seeing you. And I talk about this. I think in the future you will not hear music, you'll see music. And by that I mean every time you experience music on your phone, TV, wherever it is, it'll be more video driven than audio driven. Similar to what Beyonce did and similar to what we did years ago, way before she came up with the idea with a video driven album. that we will see the music. We will see, and by saying see, it's that you will hear the audio, but you'll see the video together. You won't just want to hear music without seeing it.
Right.
Because if I hear a song, it has one sensibility and meaning to me by me just hearing the audio. But when I see the video, it adds life to it. It brings even more descriptive of what the lyrics are.
When it comes to visuals, what if you have, for whatever reason, what if you have different views of how a song should go and what the video should look like? Which visual do you decide to go with?
Well, first of all, it starts with the artist being involved with what that is. I've never been where I didn't allow the artist. It's their creativity. And so they play a major role in what the creativity of a video is, as well as the video director. It's a team effort. I believe a lot is not I, it's we. I believe in a team approach.
So going by, your artists as well as the emancipation of the slaves through music, do you think it is important for artists, and not even just artists who are Black or of color, to know the history of music, like the information that you are giving and the emancipation of slaves through music?
Well, I think it will enlighten, encourage, and stimulate creativity. And again, I've been fortunate to be around and work with a lot of tremendously successful artists. They want to know the history. It stimulates their creativity to know the history. And I know that I know Solange is working on a new album. I know others that haven't read Emancipation, but it's going back. This whole Africa, Afro beats, Afro pop, it's going to be quite, I think, popular in the next 2 and 3 years in America.
And I have to also ask, what are your thoughts on Aretha Franklin and what she has done for music as a whole, Mr. Knowles?
A good question. She's a legend. She's absolutely has given a path for female artists. Just last night I was looking at Aretha. She must have been in her 20s. It was a different Aretha than we know today. She was a little small thing, very, very fashionable. And I never really had seen Aretha in that view and light of that young. But she has absolutely been a role model for female artists. She's absolutely has opened doors for female artists so that they can have the opportunity the same as men. And she had great songs, great voice. So truly will be missed, and our condolences go to her family.
That's very nice. Well said. So you mentioned that you were in chapter 4 of, this will be your next book, Destiny's Child, The Untold Story.
Actually, it's not. The next book is going to be public relations in media.
Oh, wow.
Because that's the next book. But simultaneously, I'm working on, and I've been working, a year and a half on Destiny's Child, The Untold Story. My style, as you could probably tell in my first 2 books, is to have other guests in the book. In the Untold Story, I have several guests that go as far back as 1992 with Destiny's Child. Choreographers, music directors, label reps, folks that really know the real true story. There's several books out that are probably at most 40% correct. Mm-hmm. But this is the untold story from the eyes of people and the voices of folks that were actually there, know exactly how it's unfolded, and they know all of it's a very factual. This is not, just me coming up with the Jedi mind trick. This is factual of what really happened. I mean, nobody really knows why the group broke up. Nobody really know who were the first members of the group. Nobody really knows a whole lot of things about the group. That's factual. That we know all of the social media today, we know the gossip, but nobody really knows the factual stuff.
Mr. Knowles, I have to ask, at all will Beyonce, Kelly, Michelle, and even maybe some of the other past members, Solange, will they also be involved in the book at all?
Well, Solange was not a past member. Solange was a dancer. She was a lead dancer in the group when I think she was 13. But, we're hoping that there's a reunion one day with Destiny's Child. But, that's really up to the young ladies to really, well, they're not young ladies anymore. It's really up to the current members to make that decision along with myself.
Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts on Destiny's Child possibly having a biopic? People would love to see it.
Well, we're working on something. I can tell you that, but it won't be from that perspective. Okay. It'll be more from my life, what got Destiny's Child to where it's at. It'll be more about my story, and not just Destiny's Child. It'll be many artists that I've worked with. Destiny's Child would certainly play a strong role in that biopic, but it won't be solely about a Destiny's Child biopic. We know a lot about Destiny's Child visuals and stuff, but we don't know what really got them there and the struggles that people had way before Destiny's Child existed. And that's a more exciting story, I think, knowing how things unfolded and happened. We know Destiny's Child's success, and we know how many records they've sold. So that might be the approach.
That would be so compelling. I just had to give my opinion. You've had an amazing career. What is the longevity to success, and specifically as a music mogul, and record executive? What is the secret?
Well, again, it goes back to the keyword passion. I was prepared. Most folks don't know I did 20 years of corporate America. Mm-hmm. Being number one sales rep at Xerox, first black to sell CT and MRI scanners, one of the first blacks to be a neurosurgical specialist with Johnson & Johnson. And that prepared me. And then I went back to school, and I took courses, and I went to seminars, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn. And so to me, that's one of my keys, is just the passion to want to continue to grow. Again, I talk about this in the DNA of Achievers. It hadn't always been success. Failure is part of the growth, and that's part of risk-taking. You're going to make mistakes, but it's an opportunity to grow and not a reason to quit. And most people quit. And so I think it's also building key relationships, relationships in the industry. Because it's not I, it's we. And the successful people that I know, they have relationships. They have the passion. They take risks. They have the talent. They know every aspect or most aspects of the business. They grow as technology has grown in the music industry. And it will be the number one thing that changes in the future will be technology, as we're seeing with streaming. Folks ain't buying CDs, and they ain't downloading on iTunes as much as they used to. I can tell you almost 75% of our revenue at Music World is streaming. It's not selling on iTunes. So it's a different world. And we have to understand the impact of social media on entertainment. All of those things have changed. And we have to also understand that the United States is the third country in the world that consumes music. Number one is Japan. Number two is the UK. Number three is America. So you have to have a worldwide approach to have true success, not just a U.S. approach.
And speaking of the streaming and what's happening now with the music business, what is your opinion, Mr. Knowles, on album bundles?
Well, it's just bundling before, as a college professor, one of my courses that I teach is Music Business 101. And one of the section we talk about is on one of the test questions is music bundling. So that's why I'm laughing. I'm like, oh, that's a test question I always have. And when we talk about bundling, we always talk about music. We started this out talking years ago about a CD with a ticket to a concert with maybe a T-shirt. Bundling is two or more products together. That's gone away almost today, the bundling concept, because it's hard to bundle a stream. So it just doesn't mean as much. There's ways of doing it with technology, but I'm not a component like I used to be. If you asked me that question 12 years ago, I would say it's extremely important. Today, don't know its importance is as much.
Yeah, I only just brought it up because I know Nicki Minaj and Travis Scott, there's just been talks about, she feels that he got to #1 with his album instead of her because they were saying there were some bundles, there were tour passes that were a part of the album sales in some way. But
it's according to your audience, obviously they took the time to know and learn who their audience was. And if you look at him, for example, Nicki Minaj touring is nothing compared to his. I mean, his tour base is extremely, extremely large. And it takes time to build. One of the things that is a misnomer in the music industry for artists and songwriters and producers, this is not microwave success. These folks have failed. Most of them got dropped. Most of them had many times the doors shut on them. And you have to build an audience and so if I sold 1 million records, it doesn't mean 1 million people is going to come to my concert. So you have to build a touring base. That's a whole different approach than selling records.
Do you think sales are just as important now?
Well, when you're the record label, which I am,
right,
and when you invest $1 million or more in a project, hell yeah, it's important. Because at the end of the day, I just said this in a staff meeting. At the end of the day, from a record label perspective, I'm investing in an artist to make money. I'm not investing $100,000 or $1 million or $5 million because I like you. My stockholders or my investors, they don't go for that concept. So it's got to be profitability in all of this from a business perspective.
Right, yeah.
And that's what I think artists sometimes forget, that we make sizable investments, and we'd like to get a return on our investment, no different than someone invested in Apple. And I say this to my class, the 360 concept, record label, a piece of the publishing, touring, and a lot of artists and some managers and folks say, that's awful. Well, if you or any of your listeners invested in Apple, how would you feel if you invested $1,000 and Apple told you, we only going to give you a return on the iPad. We're not going to do it with the iPhone. We're not going to do it with Apple streaming. We're just going to give you back an investment on what you'd be like, I'm not doing that. I invested in Apple.
Do you think award shows are still relevant to the music industry?
I think anytime that you can build an audience when you're in front of millions of people is very relevant. Because this is a very, very simple, sometimes, Jewel, we make this so complicated. It's really audience equals sales. He or she who has the most audience will sell the most. So every opportunity that one gets to build an audience, gives them an opportunity to sell more. So from that perspective, all of it, it's a combination of things, not one thing that makes success. It's a combination. But at the end of the day, it ends up with audience. And doing award shows, if you're on there and there's 5 million people watching it, that's 5 million people in audience that you have an opportunity to persuade to become a fan.
Are you also familiar with culture vultures and what that means? Do you think that at all has had an effect on the origin of music?
I'm the first to say, because I continually learn. So you explain to me what that is.
Okay, sure. Culture vultures, they say, are, they would be considered like Justin Timberlake or maybe Justin Bieber at one point, or maybe even Tina Marie would have been considered one. They're saying that it also is related to cultural appropriation.
So basically it's taking another culture and using it to one's advantage that's not part of that culture. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So what you're really saying is white people that take black folks' music. That's what you're really trying to say, right?
Yes. So, but
you're trying to be politically correct with it? Culture vultures.
Yeah, but it is a very popular. It gets thrown around a lot. I mean, honestly, like Cardi B has been hit with that label too, and Bruno Mars as well.
I have a different opinion of that. I'm a Justin Timberlake fan because I think he's just an exceptional artist. Not anything to do with that he's black or white. I just think he's an exceptional artist and an exceptional person because I know him and his team personally. But before I answer that, I hope your listeners heard what I just did, and that is to say, I don't know what that means. Often people are embarrassed, ashamed, afraid to say, I don't know what that means. But in communications, the moment you say a word that I don't understand, you and I stop communicating. The brain literally freezes because you're still stuck on what the hell is culture vulture. So I hope the listeners saw and heard that I stopped and say, hey, I don't know what that means. You tell me what it means. Now I answer the question. And I started out with Justin. I just think that we are inspired by different types of music. I think artists are inspired by different types of music. Occasionally, I think what culture vulture that happens, I can give it the first thing that comes to mind is Elvis Presley. I think he did jack a lot of moves from James Brown and Lil Richard. But that's part of the whole music thing. We're always inspired by others. I mean, there's no trademark on dance moves or trademarks. When you start getting into sampling, and that's different from a legal perspective. But there's no trademark on how James Brown dance moves were. And so if someone wants to add that and to their show along with, I'm like, that's great. I think we all grow and learn. So I don't have that perspective that some people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I just wanted to know, like, is there a difference? Because some people can just genuinely be touched by the music. That's what they grew up listening to. And, just is there a way to tell if somebody's just conveniently profiting over it or if is it a genuine taste?
Well, I had a boy band on Columbia Records named Signature, and it was 4 white guys, and you would not have known the difference of them or Boyz II Men, and that was generally their sound. It wasn't like that was their sound. So I personally have witnessed. I mean, we weren't sitting around like, oh gosh, let's jack this. But sometimes people do. Sometimes you're inspired by seeing something in the past and saying, oh, wow. And I think that's okay. I think that says whoever inspired you is me saying, man, I look up to you. You made a difference. But one day, I've seen this happen before. And so many young ladies look like Beyonce, try to sing like Beyonce, dance like Beyonce. There's artists out today. But I've never looked at like, I'm going to be angry because you did that. It's still giving reverence in saying, hey, you made an impact.
You also are going to be writing a book, as you mentioned, about public relations. And what is it that you are hoping for people to get out of that book? What do you think people need to know about public relations?
Well, this one is more of a business book. This is really for the business community, just to know how to effectively communicate, how to now use social media, the steps of just 101, what a press release should say. It's fundamentally, this is more of a educational book than a general marketplace.
That's great. So you've tapped into different genres, it seems. Do you have a favorite as an author?
No, I have a strategy as an author. That's different.
And what
things that I do and we do here at Music World, all is derived from strategy. It's not derived from emotional impact. So first I had to establish myself as an author. I didn't want to talk about the music industry. Mm-hmm. When you look at the DNA of achievers and, that's really, I wanted to establish myself as an author. And then I wanted to talk about the music industry. And I wanted to talk more about myself. These books all tie in together. So I always come from a strategic place. After Destiny's Child, I'll be doing my autobiography. That's all from a strategic standpoint.
Wow. And how is that autobiography? Do you know yet how it's going to differ from Racism from the Eyes of the Child?
Because the last 20 pages of Racism from the Eyes of the Child, I simply tease the reader on what's to come. Again, that was strategy. And you look at the last 20 pages, that's where I tease the reader. This is things about me you didn't know. Talk about therapy. I talk about things people didn't know. And so that's kind of like part one of what the autobiography will be. Emancipation of music then is to set up Destiny's Child, Untold Story.
And with the emancipation of slaves through music, you are hoping that people will learn more, right? But what else are you hoping they will get out of this lovely book?
Well, I just think I've learned more and more about books. I had to go through the same process with music and what the reader is really looking for, and how to really touch the reader. Again, this is about facts about slavery that people had no idea existed. This talks about also what a slave had to go through and how music impacted that. It talks about after slavery, post-slavery, how did music impact us? And so this is really what this book is all about, and it takes us all the way up to modern day. That's what this book is about, and that's what I hope people get out of it, is that they say, I had no idea after reading it, I had no idea about most of this book, that any of this ever existed this way. That's what I want the reader to take away, that I've learned something about black music that I didn't know before.
Mr. Knowles, everybody. Mr. Knowles, I want to thank you so much again for visiting So Booking Cool. It's always great learning from you and learning more about you, and so excited for the emancipation of slaves through music. Mr. Knowles, please let people know how they can keep up with you.
Well, I'd like for them to go to Mathew, and by the way, Mathew is with one T. And I talk about why that is. But MathewKnowles.com. And there you can find all of my social media, all of everything I'm doing. I'll be going to Johannesburg in October and Cape Town, and spending a couple of weeks in Africa doing their #1 co-hosting for the first time, #1 TV show. Looking forward to that, and looking forward to some other things that I'll be doing at Alabama A&M University. And so that's where I like for people to go. It also talks about I'm on the board of Make-A-Wish Foundation, the only black in our region that's on the board. And I give information about Make-A-Wish, and because that's something dear to my heart. That Destiny Child did years ago in San Antonio for the first time, and this young lady came, and her wish was to be on the front row, talk to the girls, and on the ride back from San Antonio to Houston, the young lady unfortunately died. That really touched me. So that's where I want folks to go, to understand what I'm doing. They can book me as a speaker. I do a lot of public speaking. So everything you need to know is right there at MathewKnowles.com.
Phenomenal. I love it. And if you have any other final thoughts or anything you'd like to say, Mr. Knowles, I welcome that as well to all my guests.
Well, I like sayings. I don't know why I can create all of these sayings. I guess I always like to leave with a saying, and that is, no one of us is as strong as all of us.
Yes, say that again for the people.
No one of us is as strong as all of us. We have to stick together as people. We absolutely have to go out and vote coming up this November. So I'm going to start that dialogue and conversation right now. It's the most important election of our lives. Black women in Alabama for the last Senate race, 98% of our registered female voters in Alabama went out to vote. So every vote counts. God bless you, and thank you a lot for allowing me, Jewel, to be on So Booking Cool.
Of course, it is such a pleasure, and thank you to all the listeners. Until next time, So Booking Cool.